Matthew chapter 18. We're going to be reading verses 1 through 3. If you will, let's read those aloud together. At the same time came the disciples unto Jesus, saying, Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus called a little child unto him, and set him in the midst of them, and said, Verily I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. I don't know if you saw the sign out front, the one over the water fountain, but it says, the mind of a child. Now, this is saying that Jesus says that unless we are converted, unless we're saved, and we become as little children, we can't enter into the kingdom of heaven. So to understand that, we have to understand the characteristics of a child. One of the characteristics, and there are many different characteristics that children have besides these, and things that I say, there's always going to be exceptions. And I know that you're probably thinking, well, you don't have any kids, you don't know. But I am oldest of 5. I grew up with a bunch of kids all the time. And so I have seen a child a time or two in my life. Characteristics of a child. And when he called this little child over to him, this little kid, I'm pretty sure it was a small one, really young. Probably a toddler, one that's just learning to talk. Or at least that's the way I see it in my mind. But the characteristics of a child, one of them would be humility. See, children are small and helpless. And in most cases, they know that. They know that they need help. And they're not afraid to ask for it. Now, sometimes they will try and climb up on a counter to get a cookie that they're not supposed to have. But for the most part, a child knows that he needs an adult, a grown-up, to help them out with things in their life. They need something off a top shelf, they need a grown-up. They need to tie their shoes, they need a grown-up. Children know that they need help, and they aren't afraid to ask for it. Another characteristic of a child is a constant search for knowledge. They don't know what everything is, and they aren't afraid to ask and learn something new. I saw a cartoon a while back, and in it there was this little girl, and she would go up to these people, these adults, and ask them what they were doing. And they would tell her. And she would say, why? And they would answer her question, why? And they would answer her question, why? And they would answer her question until they finally got frustrated. I don't know if you've ever had a child do that to you. Just keep asking question after question after question. They want to know things. They don't completely understand it. They know that they don't know everything, and so they have to ask questions. I think that may be why in schools you hear teachers say, don't be afraid to ask a question. There's no such thing as a stupid question. It's probably because by the time they get into school, they've already heard that their questions are stupid so much, they decide that they don't need to ask anymore. But they have a constant search for knowledge. Another characteristic of a child is they're quick to forgive. Have you ever seen two kids out playing? They get into a fight, one pushes the other one down. They get upset at each other. Give them a little bit of time. a little bit of space, and next thing you know, they'll be out playing again together all over again like it never even happened. How many of us are willing to do that? We get knocked down, pushed around by someone, give them a little bit of time, you're still going to be feeling like you just got knocked down and pushed around. The children are quick to forgive. Another characteristic of a child is that they're very trusting. They're very trusting. They believe what they're told and they accept it as truth. This kind of leads me to another topic, and I'm sure that you understand that they are very trusting. You can tell a child anything. That's why we have the game that you play with kids, Got Your Nose. And how many of them fall for that? Especially the young ones. And it's a fun game because they get so scared and freaked out. Oh no, I want my nose back, Mommy. They believe it. You just told them you had their nose. Or you pull a quarter out from behind their ear. They love that one. Everybody else is like, oh, it's so easy. But to a child, they trust. And that does lead me to something else. Recently, we hear about all these studies that are done. Surveys and things, and we think of them being in all these different places, but UAB did a study. And they found in their study between the ages of 14 and 15 that kids spend, this is going to sound weird, but they spend 24 hours a day on average with social media or some form of communication electronically or television or video games. 24 hours. Now what they did was, like if you're watching TV, you're texting someone and you're checking your Facebook status for an hour, then that would be 3 hours. An hour for each activity. When they add it all up, it's worth 24 hours of some sort of social media, some sort of contact outside of their home, outside of where they are. 24 hours. And taking into account how trusting a child is, how much of an impact can a parent have, can a family have, can a community have, if 24 hours of the day this child is being reached and talked to and influenced by outside sources? That makes a big impact. Around 8 hours of the day, they're at school being taught by other people. And we wonder why the world's going the way it's going. It's because we don't have an impact like we used to. They're very trusting. Another characteristic of a child is that they are worry-free. They're worry-free. Now again, you have exceptions. Adam was an exception. Adam worried about everything. Everything. But generally speaking, children are worry-free. They trust that the people that are taking care of them are going to take care of them. And they don't worry about what might go wrong. They don't worry about that stuff. Well, we don't have money to buy this. Well, use your credit card. Write a check. I've heard story after story of how kids imagine a credit card or a check as this magic device that just gets you stuff. They don't worry. They live in the moment. They're not thinking about what happened last week. They're not even worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. Right now, they've got their little truck or their little Barbie, and they're either sitting in the house or out in the mud, and they're having fun right then. They're not worried about how they're going to get their clothes cleaned up. I remember it was a few years back at the youth camp in North Carolina. I had been doing some videoing, and I have this character that I do that's, his name's Jebediah, and he's your typical redneck from the woods person, walks around barefoot and all that. We've been doing some videoing, was about to wrap it up for the day, and it all of a sudden just starts pouring rain. I mean, all kinds of rain. And I was waiting a little bit to go on to put the video camera up so it didn't get wet, and all of a sudden some people came running in. Hey, they're out here sliding in the mud. So we went out there to get some video of it. And before long, I find myself at the end of the line running and sliding face first through the mud. Now, the whole time I was doing that, yeah, it was fun. But I was thinking, how are these clothes going to get clean? I'm 8 hours away from home. I thought about that. Now, when I was younger, sliding through the mud, there's no way I would have thought about that. That wouldn't even have crossed my mind. But now that I've gotten older, I think about it. We think about things more. Not just because we're older, but because for some reason we've lost the ability to live in the moment. To enjoy what we have right now. We're too worried about yesterday and way too worried about tomorrow. We forget what's here. The blessings that God has given us today. They're worry-free. And for the most part, they're appreciative of what they have. Christmas morning comes. All of the presents are there. The little child goes running over to them, all excited. Starts ripping the paper up. Taking out the toys. Everything's getting put together. They're excited. And what happens? You turn around and find them sitting in one of the boxes. They don't think of it as junk. It's still a part of this gift they've been given that they appreciate. And they're excited for it. Another characteristic of a child, and one of the most important ones, is they are very open to God. We've seen, going to Pell City Camp, tons of kids go down to the altar. Tons of kids go to an altar. But we don't see that many older people. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. It doesn't mean that the older people are living their lives better. It just means that the kids aren't afraid. They're not worried about what other people are thinking. They are in that moment with themselves and with God. They're open to what He's saying. And they know they need to make a move. except you be converted and become as little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. This morning I want to ask you, do you have the mind of a child? Are you humble? Are you willing to ask for help if you need it? Do you have a need, a search for knowledge going on in your life? Constantly wanting to know more? Are you quick to forgive? Easy to trust? Worry-free? Appreciative? And open to God? Like I said, there are many different characteristics that children have, and there are exceptions to every rule. But do we have that in our lives? I think that we'll find a lot of times on these topics, on these characteristics, we're lacking. We're lacking. We're not as willing to ask for help as we used to be. We want to do it on our own. We know what's best. We're not willing to search for knowledge like we used to be. We're growing up. We know things. We don't need any more information. We're not as quick to forgive because now we're older. We understand more what those actions meant. We understand more about the world and what it's really like. And we know that these things are just going to happen again. So why forgive them for it this time when they're just going to do it again? They're not really sorry. We're not very quick to trust. We have people in our lives that have messed up, done things wrong. And instead of giving them another chance, we begin to shut them off. We don't trust them. Someone tells you, hey, I'll do this for you. The very first thing we think is, yeah, right. We don't trust. Even when it comes to God. God's told us He'll never leave us nor forsake us. He's told us all of these promises that He'll do for us. But when it comes to our lives, it sounds good. It looks good on paper. But in action, trusting God isn't quite as easy as it used to be. Used to, we would be like the kid on the edge of a pool jumping to his father, trusting him to be caught. Now we wouldn't jump off the edge. We don't trust God that much. We want to climb down the ladder on our own to be able to get into the pool. Or not get in at all. We're not worry-free. We're constantly concerned about yesterday. The things that we're having to drag along with us. Constantly concerned about tomorrow and the things that we'll have to deal with then. And sometimes, when we actually do think of today, we don't think of the good things that God has going on in our lives. We're more concerned thinking about the things that are going wrong. The things we wish we could change. The things we want to be different. And we aren't appreciative. When good things come into our life, we don't enjoy it. We don't celebrate it. We brace ourselves for the next wave of bad things to come. We don't enjoy the things that we have right now. We want more. We want better. We want different. And as we get older, we are definitely not more open to God than we were before. If anything, we become more closed and jaded. Life has taught us many different and difficult lessons. And God's leading, His guiding us, isn't quite as convenient, quite as easy as it used to be. Except you be converted and become as little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. This morning, do you have the mind of a child? If not, you need to do some reevaluating. Where your priorities stand, where your life's headed, how you stand with God. We don't know when the end is going to come. We don't know when it's all going to be over. But we do know that the days are numbered. We do know that the time is short. It's time to get our lives, our souls in order.